Futurama comic, issue 45. Good, another What If Machine episode. Farnsworth says it's improved because it no longer gives out toxic nerve gas. He must be referencing something that happened off screen. Bender asks what if he ruled the world, and the machine inexplicably doesn't work until he threatens to hit it with a hammer. We don't get to see how Bender got the power, so that's a missed opportunity. Bender says in a fancy suit to a woman that he doesn't need help, and then flirts with her when the microphone's on. He's probably ripping off a bunch of other leaders' speeches at the podium here, which I'm guessing because his first speech reminds me of what that lifelike android for the Dark Legion said at the end of his speech to the public. And not coming up with his own speech is actually something that someone would make a big deal out of. That'd be considered a scandal. He looks nervous looking in a book of presidential quotes in front of an angry crowd, and then is smart enough to throw money at them instead. That's generous of him. So no wonder his polls show that he's really popular. He's told he's been celebrating for 99 of his first 100 days in office. That's amusing because of how deadpan Calculon was about it. And Calculon was hired as his press secretary, probably without qualifications, and I bet the same could be said for the Secretary of State Hedonism bot. It turns out Bender already renamed Xmas Bender Day and forgot about it. He's disappointed to learn that and admits that the burdens of office are terrible and that he regrets being called Mr. President. So he sits on a throne and decides to be called a king instead. He's told the free money cannons have devastated the value of Earth currency. So the money was all newly printed? I didn't think that, so it could have easily not been the case. He's got no idea how to solve the problem and somehow has high disapproval ratings among people who don't exist. So he says that it's time for every world leader's solution to bad economic news. War. It's shockingly hilarious that Zap says, without a defined enemy, my suggestion is to shoot randomly in all directions. And Kip's busy cutting carrots, so one of the lasers hits Omicron Persei 8, and Lur says he'll invade the Earth now, and somehow doubts that he could have an invasion better than the last three. Zap somehow waited until now to tell Bender that they can't fight back in a war because all their swords were used for something else and all their bullets were melted down into presidential bling. Why did they have swords in the future? Bender says he can end this terrible nightmare by waking up. I guess he went to sleep since he wakes up in a bed being threatened by Lur himself. And for no reason there's a clown picture above himself as he's being offered an electric sword. He decides to turn himself off with an off switch that was never seen in his chest before. Well, that was depressing. We barely got to learn anything about what it'd be like if he ruled the world. Hermes wants to know what it'd be like if the world was perfectly organized, and then futilely tells him not to give him some Twilight Zone crap where he learns to regret his wish. So Hermes sees a lot of things being properly organized, like the birds, and even the carpet fibers are all pointing in the right direction, which would only be possible from a spell. It'd be more interesting to see how that came to be. So he's happy about this, and Fry turns off the simulation out of boredom, but is at least polite enough to tell him he'll watch it later on its MySpace page. Zoidberg once again isn't allowed to ask his question, which makes me wish he'll get to ask it and assume it'll be saved for the end of the issue. Farnsworth lengthens his glove finger to annoy Fry, and lets him ask what if there was a machine that could grant wishes, and he wished for a what if machine that showed him what it'd be like if Leela fell for him. Farnsworth puts it less stupidly than him, but if two different people asked that same question and Farnsworth asked it less stupidly, doesn't that mean that they used up all three of the questions they're allowed to ask it? And for no reason, it shows the entire crew showering together casually. Fry's singing happily even though the water's too cold, somehow. Zoidberg can't talk for some reason, and somehow Leela can understand him, and it's funny that there's a sensor bar over his mouth flaps now. Amy tells Scruffy the water's too cold, and he says he'll get right on it, and he somehow doesn't recognize her. Leela thanks Fry and says that with her extra layers of mutant skin, apparently, she can't always tell when things are cold or not. This is interesting, but that was contradicted when she was in a cold tundra, wasn't it? That must have been contradicted in the show at some point. She notices something different about Fry and better, and he tries to ask Leela out for a date yet again out of desperation. So she decides to see if he's new and improved by going out with him. Conveniently. And she shakes him a lot, so it comes out a prize instead of being too great. And he's still queasy from the shaking when he's at the restaurant. Oh no. They're recommended 2 lovebirds each, and he says this isn't like Leela because she'd rather do cool futuristic stuff than mushy romance. So she hilariously says they could do both. And she swings on a rope while he's holding her and says that they'll get to that movie on time. He says this is fun but painful. She's in a hurry later because she has to get this gun back to the rental place. It's funny how her dialogue sounds so mundane when she's in a sci-fi location. If I didn't explain what was great about the humor, I wouldn't be explaining everything the comic does right. She says she had fun tonight, but they can't kiss because her house gets destroyed. And out of nowhere, Lur wants them to give him Earth President Bender. The simulation ends, and Bender says he can't help it if a war story is better than a love story. Yeah, I wanted to see Leela's sci-fi adventures, but it just cuts past them and time skips between them. That scenario was contrived anyways, because there's no way they'd all shower together. Farnsworth hilariously tells Zoidberg to please get out of the way so Amy can have her turn, as if he'd need to even do that for her. Amy says she doesn't have a request, since she gets everything she wants. Zoidberg's told if the finger longer points at Amy, it's her turn, and he shockingly cuts it off, finally standing up to the professor. Then he wastes time asking what if all of them are poor stinking lobsters for a minute. I guess since he said aw, he was interrupted, and was really just trying to get sympathy before his actual question. Fry wants to find dumpster food, and Farnsworth warns them that the dumpster is going to be full of parasites, but still wants to go. The what-if machine would have had them all hate each other's smell because it would have interpreted as saying stinking, literally. And Farnsworth would be able to produce all the food he wants with his science for free. So he wouldn't need to eat from the dumpster, though maybe he wants to die. And if he's poor, he wouldn't be able to get the materials to make inventions anyways. Unless he already had inventions, and then became poor. Leela says Hermes would love organizing the dumpster. Bender tells him in the dumpster that he got invited to a free dinner at Elzar's, and the story ends with him all at a hot tub in his kitchen. Amy's relatably glad the simulation ended, and Leela wonders what if she had a normal childhood. That'd only be possible in a world where she wasn't a mutant, or her parents were welcome above ground. Like I'd actually expect from a future where everyone's already used to seeing weird-looking aliens everywhere. Also, they're definitely past the third question for the what-if machine. I guess Farnsworth changed the what-if machine. Leela gets shown herself in the simulation talking about how she's in a normal neighborhood and not near a house made of sewage. That's confusing because how would this Leela be familiar with how her house actually would have been? Then after her family talks boringly about normal stuff, saying the word normal too much, Leela says she won't be grateful for the life she actually lived, and she likes this existence no matter what. Why does the simulation show her as talking like she remembers her real life? That's stupid. Why show a simulation that won't actually show us what it'd be like? Then the cops show up at the door and just have to be mad that there's mutants living above the ground. Then how did they take this long to find that out? Did they replace someone else's family to live here? And somehow Bender was still president here. Leela questions this and Fry shows up wanting a kiss and Amy's still a lobster. Is the what-if machine glitching? Just explain that then. All the simulations combined together just to be silly for the audience. And Lur's wife lampshades that he doesn't need to shout after bringing Farnsworth here. Everyone here remembers the previous what-if scenarios. And Lur says he asked what if Omicronians took over the Earth. But somehow Farnsworth doesn't remember how to turn the what-if machine on. Bender starts hitting the machine with a hammer and everything returns to normal. Bender says that this whole story was just the answer to his what if you hit it with a hammer question. I was wondering why I didn't answer that. And I'm glad I know the answer now. So apparently the answer to what if you hit it with a hammer was it would glitch out so that all the simulations would run into each other. I guess it conveniently only showed that possible result. You'd think that the only answer would be it would stop working entirely. Bender wants Zoidberg to get a turn already. That's out of character. Farnsworth smells something and wonders what if he didn't fix that nerve gas problem. The crew passes out, and Zoidberg's not immune to it after all, so what took so long? He just needed more of it. Well, that was a needlessly dark ending. Futurama comic, issue 46. Despite being in the future, Farnsworth has an old-fashioned letter from his old friend Dr. Mobius, and reminds him of this package he needs the crew to deliver. And Bender says he wants to be able to express his free will. He's hit with a brick, not that we see it impact him. And Farnsworth says that in this story, you could choose from several alternative paths. And gets asked who he's talking to. I wish he really was talking to Scruffy. Leela wonders what he wants them to do with this box, and Hermes says the expositron will explain everything. Fry says they're going in circles, and Leela says she'll reboot it. Zap calls Leela and has her on mandatory read dial, and he breaks the fourth wall too. Keith says that he has something rare to give Amy, a schmizmar that his species only excrete once. He thinks they'd like to hear the story of how it happened. The crew leaves the room, but I'll read it because I don't like when stuff happens off screen. He says that one evening, Amy and him were playing a Wii game, but it was all just a holodeck simulation. Why wouldn't he just say what really happened right away? He says he really wrote some sheet music for the holophoner in which he asked the holodeck to create that scene. It was all a dream, but when he woke up, there was the prop line, and he's gonna matter transport the music in the ring. Why would he be so long-winded? Bender sees the ring show up and plans on smashing it, even though I thought he wanted to sell it for being rare. It's so hard that his stomp ends up being bounced back at his head or something. He somehow kicks himself and gets sent into the teleporter. Fry decides to run to the portal after Bender to admit he was wrong about how hard it was. Nibbler calls out for Leela, planning to erase her memory of the fact that he can talk because he just loves being her pet so much, apparently. Why would he tell Leela what happened to Fry just to erase her memory of it? This issue thinks it's a choose-your-own-adventure story, but it's not. Or maybe it not really being that way was supposed to be the joke. Calculon tells the robot actress he'll never look at another woman again, since he's a robot, and she says she had their bodies soldered together, and he says that explains why they've been in the same position for 2 days. That's silly, because he would have known about that earlier. Bender gets warped here with the Trek effect and gets told he's supposed to be in the next scene. He's told to read the script, as I wonder why the director thinks Bender's an actor who's supposed to be in the movie. He's overwhelmed by the script and decides to go to sleep. He has a dream about robot women fusing together into a scary robot, and he gets told he's awake by a robot who says his sleepwalking will now end and be replaced with hallucinations. Bender says he got hit in the head and keeps being given choices he doesn't want to make. The robot says he's gonna knock him out, so this might be a dream of his and he didn't really wake up. Because why would he be suddenly somewhere else? Fry gets warped to a different place than Bender for no reason. Fry's loyal enough to his friend to refuse to give people the ring, no matter how tempting their offer is. Clamps threatens him into running to a room with a convenient portal. Leela goes to a mall to refuel the ship, and wants to get aspirin for that headache after looking at Nibbler for too long. An alien greets Leela and says a condescending compliment and offers to shapeshift into a one-eyed snake for old time's sake. She recognizes them as Alcazar, and arbitrarily lies to her when she knows the truth. It says he's got his own TV network now, with satellite tracking webcams all over universes, and even shows Leela in her shower. Well, this is all forced. She elbows him, as I wonder why I didn't expect that. Leela sees Zoidberg about to be run over by a space train while tied to the tracks. So Leela changes to the Nibbler channel and sees Nibbler talking on the phone to his leader, saying that the Smizar is being tracked, but they don't have it yet. That name is too hard to pronounce, and he sees the camera and gets interrupted. She just dismisses it as him from another universe. Then Bender finishes smashing the Smizmar, even though it was too hard for him earlier. Fry wonders how he got back here, and Bender thinks he knows, but has a bad headache. And so does Leela. If it was Nibbler who brought them all back here, I wish we saw that. Leela complains that they're lost in space, and I really hate that I didn't get to see how all of them got reunited with each other. It completely took me out of the story, and I'm already annoyed by the fourth wall breaks as it is. Leela says their only hope if they're lost is to find that GPS bought at the old-fashioned flea market. Bender says that he is a GPS, but she doubts that'll help, probably because he's not trustworthy. Fry says he can't find that Smiz mat anymore, which makes no sense because 1, I thought Bender smashed it right in front of him. Everyone would remember that. Instead, he thinks he last saw it in another universe. Nibbler takes off his jacket without him immediately questioning it and turning around, somehow, and finds the GPS in his jacket because of him. It has some on-screen directions, and because it arbitrarily breaks the fourth wall, Bender smashes it, and the ship goes into a black hole, confusingly ending the story there, making me look forward to a second story as a result. And then the comic pisses me off even more by pretending that having Q*bert criticize it magically means that it's absolved of all criticism and is actually perfect. That's not how it works. If anything, you make the story look 3 times worse when you make fun of any critics, because now you look immature. He says that maybe when Hermes hit Bender in the head, it caused him to start being obsessed with smashing, to explain why he started doing that all of a sudden. Pretty oddly specific. That's the only thing that it caused in him? I figured it was just another one of the series' failed attempts at a joke, because it was a weird thing happening for no reason. It makes sense because Bender always loves doing bad things. Morbo says that was Q*bert with an editorial reply, and while he disagrees with him, he won't explain why somehow. Is Morbo supposed to be the author's mouthpiece? Because I'm not sure it's very wise to have Morbo be your mouthpiece. Nixon says Morbo was right. Another bad mouthpiece. And then we see a basketball player tell Farnsworth, so that's what would go down if Nixon watched the TV news. Farnsworth says God only knows for no reason. It just has to be for no reason, doesn't it? Because of that, the pink spiral from one of the movies says someone said God. Then he does his thing of being a dick and not giving any clear answers, saying that he could only answer Yivo's questions if he is a god. Only a dick would talk like that. He's asked if he can manipulate time and space, because Yivo can't, and it's giving him an inferiority complex among the super beings in the other universes. The ship gets taken out of the black hole and sent hurtling towards another planet. Considering that we already got told that this pink spiral existed in one of the past movies, this isn't really a Deus Ex Machina. It's a Chekhov's gun. Although he wasn't set up in this story in particular, that's not the point. It still makes sense that the heroes got this rescue. At least as far as a space super being magical makes sense. I think he was created by a wizard. Bender mocks Leela for a crash landing, and she has a good point that they're all still alive. Wasn't much of a real crash then. Then, because of an insane coincidence, Zap goes over to Leela and says he was attacked before he could get away by aliens. Then Leela and her friends randomly get superhero costumes out of nowhere, which is just insulting at this point. It makes me automatically assume that this whole story was just a dream of Bender's when Hermes hit him with a brick. No one even lampshades how they got these costumes. And they'd have to put on miracle cream first. Somehow, the only question any of these characters have is where's Nibbler? Then cave women out of nowhere show up to attack the ball aliens, and one of them conveniently has Kip's ring. What a relief. She says she found it in another place and made a trade. Thog says she was given the ring and brought here by Nibbler, I guess through the matter transporter. I hate when important things happen off screen. Fry gets worried because nobody's giving them an option to choose from, and somehow he knew that brains and planes would show up. Kip shouldn't be questioning why the women are running away from them scared. They can't deal with things flying in the air. Then everyone gets made stupid by the brains. Leela asks Zap to go to the prom with her, and Zap says he likes looking at her shirt. No, he's still in character. Fry wishes he had that multi-sided die, and he gets given a drawing of it by Nibbler with instructions. Then, for no reason, the entire crew ends up back in the ship and on course, even though the ship crashed on an alien planet. This isn't a good story. Good stories don't just frustrate the audience over and over. It'd be fine if one of these characters said that they were just dreaming, so the ship never crashed at all. Fry didn't lose the Smizar, and Bender says he just picked that pocket and nothing was in it. Wernstrom talked to them from the matter transporter for no reason. The Smizar has the ability to shift between alternate universes. Wernstrom says he'll show how he got it back thanks to the guy who has cameras all over the place. Then Bender smashes the floor because he's mad and falls through a hole into Alice in Wonderland. Which would only make sense if it was just a dream. Oh, good. It is. Leela doesn't even know where this package is supposed to be delivered, and there's no address. Fry thinks they're not allowed to open the box. They open the box, and Leela says it's for Farnsworth from Dr. Mobius. I guess since Farnsworth is so used to getting packages and being expected to deliver them, he was too lazy to read it properly and find out that it was actually for him. Fry gives Amy a gift that she somehow got more than once, so he was just lying to Fry to sound impressive. She thanks him, and the story ends with Farnsworth getting a red letter, which is not the type of ending I like. That story was a needlessly confusing mess, where the heroes go to all sorts of places. Kif wouldn't give Amy a Smizmar as a casual gift if it can randomly teleport her to other universes, because that'd be considered too dangerous. Smizmars don't need to be the cause of the teleporting to other universes, because that's what the matter transporter was for. Well, the Smizmar was needed to get the heroes from that planet Zap was trapped on to the ship in space again. But it'd only be in space just fine again if they were sent to another universe from their own. It would be better if it was explained that it was all just a dream Bender had when Hermes hit him with a brick. But instead I'm just left disoriented and annoyed. This story had too much to it to bother reiterating, and it's too confusing to have all that effort to be worth it. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's really that much to say about all of it. This confusing story showed off a bunch of different what-if scenarios. Zoidberg's was worst, being really repetitive. Bender's was depressing and established too little about how he'd run the planet. Just saying he kept throwing fake money at people with cannons and then started a war without a way to fight it. Fry sees a story where Leela fell in love with him, which had a contrived start because there's no reason the crew would be casually showering together just so Leela could see Fry like that. And what took her so long to give him a chance? They had a good time together, but I felt cheated that it kept skipping ahead in time and barely explaining how their adventures were. Leela gets shown a normal childhood for her, and confuses me because she somehow remembers her real life, and the what-if scenario machine glitches because every simulation takes place in the same universe as Bender's simulation. How are all of the simulations about Bender's what if he hit it with a hammer in question if it didn't show him getting to hit it with a hammer before it would show what would happen afterwards?